when AI first started kind of coming out, everyone was like, yeah, but it's not gonna replace creative work. It's replacing creative work, and it's doing a pretty good job in a lot of ways. And I think what's surprising about AI in the last few years is that often it is more creative than us, and it can take into account more information than us. And I think we are heading into a future in which AI and other technology are going to take over a lot of what we do.
Welcome to the Felt Experience podcast, where we discuss with some of the world's leaders and advocates how the physical environments of where we live, work and are educated can profoundly impact our physical, psychological and emotional health and well-being. I'm Melissa Henschke, founder and director of Archetypes of Interiority. Welcome to the Felt Experience. In today's episode, we will talk to Itai Palti about creating conscious cities. What is a conscious city? Curious? Tune in to see how Itai is creating change in this movement. Itai Palti is a practising architect, researcher and multidisciplinary artist, focusing on the relationship between people and place. He is the founder of the Centre for Conscious Design and a Director of Hume, a science-informed architecture and urban design practice. In 2015, Itai founded the Conscious Cities movement, a new field of research and practice for building aware and responsive environments using data analysis, AI, tech, and science-informed design. For his work in advancing changes in the design profession, he was named by Metropolis magazine as one of 2020's game changers in transformative ideas in health, social justice, technology and urbanism. Itai carries out thought leadership and advisory roles in a number of other research and policy bodies, contributing to strategies that focus on systems change and the promotion of design as a socially conscious profession. His work and writing has been featured internationally, and he is a regular speaker at events focused on the built environment and human impact. So Itai, welcome. What has been your journey to get to where you are? Like, why architecture? What's been the journey and the narrative to now?
I think for me, there is a story that when I was applying for different universities that I think gave me a very good understanding of why I went to study architecture. So I studied at UCL, University College London, at the Bartlett School of Architecture. And during the time when we were applying for universities, I also applied to different universities. One of them was Cambridge. I didn't get in. But what was interesting about that is the professor that interviewed me asked me why I wanted to go study architecture. And I said that I wanted to have, positive impact on the world, and it was a way to do that. And he said to me, that's not a good answer. And the answer he said to me actually stuck with me, even though I never saw him again in my life. And he said to me, people should go and study architecture because they are curious about the world. And I think that is a really good reason. And I understood over time that that was the reason that I went to study architecture, because it encompasses so much of what we experience. And if you're an observational person, if you are someone who looks around you, your surroundings a lot, then you tend to start looking at how your surroundings shape experiences. And therefore, I think curious people are likely to be drawn to study architecture. So that's how I got to architecture. During my architecture studies, I guess the type of projects that I was doing were related always to kind of the social dimension of places. And the thesis project which I worked on was called The Case for Curiosity. And that project suggested that curiosity, using curiosity as a design tool, could create an experience in which people became more empathic towards one another. And so the research that this thesis led to kind of opened up this world of that I think we're not exposed to in architecture studies, of look at all this information that science is giving us about how we function, how the world around us shapes the way we think, the way we behave, the way we connect to people. Um, and and from there, the kind of um, realizing the potential of how science can inform the way we design just kind of continued. So after my studies, I started speaking to one of my favorite people, Professor Moshe Bal, who is a neuroscientist. And he was kind enough to let a 24-year-old, at the time I was 24 years old, 24-year-old architect with almost no experience to come and speak to him. And we ended up meeting every couple of weeks for about a year and a half.
Wow.
And from that emerged a lot of the ideas about how to integrate neuroscience and design.
Mm-hmm.
And also from that emerged the Conscious Cities Manifesto, which kind of set off a lot of the other work that followed.
Cool. That's my next question. How did Conscious Cities come about and why?
Ah, well, maybe I answered it. I'll try and answer it in a different way. Yeah, Conscious Cities did come about because of this seeking out new ways to inform the way we make decisions in design processes, new ways to look at ourselves and understand ourselves. And I think new ways to catalyze change in our relationship with place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of so after we published the Conscious Cities Manifesto in The Guardian, there was already straight after that a conference in London that was organized, and I'd already set up the Conscious Cities movement and started seeking out people who wanted to publish articles and ideas based around this concept. And I think in many ways, Conscious Cities is there to change the design professions, but also for our collective understanding as a society to help us ask good questions about where we're going, about what kind of society we're building ourselves into, what kind of people we're creating ourselves into by the spaces that we create that eventually shape us. And so the movement is really about bringing to life that conversation, which should help us become more conscious or aware or cognizant of the way that environments shape us and the way that we choose to shape ourselves through environments.
And how we experience it as well, that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
The
it all
experience of the
feeds
city.
into this awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose, so what would you say is a conscious city? Like, how would you encapsulate a conscious city? Like, I live in Adelaide. On some elements, it's conscious, I would say. People are sort of connected, but in other areas, we've got a long way to go. So how would you describe a conscious city? Is there a place that you would say, yeah, this is a conscious city?
I think because Conscious Cities came out in the last decade, actually it was in the previous decade, then often people think of it as something that is related to technology, to futurism, and so on. And in a lot of ways it is, because it asks questions about the future, and it does ask questions about the role of technology. But consciousness is something that we don't understand yet as a society, as a community in science as well. And it can mean different things to different people. On the surface level, consciousness, you can talk about it as awareness.
Mm-hmm.
How aware are we of how the city shapes our behavior and how we shape it? Um, on a kind of like, metaphysical sense, there are ways of talking about consciousness of, is it the collective actions of people? Is it the collective thoughts of people in a city that creates this consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's my role to say what
Is or isn't.
which
Yeah.
kind of consciousness it is, and I don't think I know, because obviously why would I know if no one does? And so I would say that there are a few ways that I find helpful to look
Mm-hmm.
at this
Okay.
idea. If you look at a city or a built environment as a accumulation of human decisions,
Mm-hmm.
meaning all of your surroundings, most of them were decided in some way or another, whether they were by designers, urban designers, architects, yourself in your own home. Our environments are an accumulation of human decisions a lot of the time. And that accumulation of decisions is really a reflection of collective intent, a reflection of the consciousness that and the consciousnesses that created those
Mm-hmm.
environments.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, you can say that every city in history is a conscious city in some way or another.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whether the decisions that shaped those cities were considering everyone's needs or considering specific people's needs, or the way that those decisions were made, ended up creating different types of cities.
Mm-hmm.
But they are all manifestations of human intent
Mm-hmm.
and of human consciousness. And when you look at any place through that lens, it allows you to be more critical in the good sense,
Mm-hmm.
more aware of how decisions have shaped the environments, and through that awareness, perhaps create more conscious cities, meaning it's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spectrum between um, environments that were shaped with less awareness or less empathy or less care to ones that were shaped with more awareness and more empathy. And we obviously want to try and get to the latter side of the spectrum.
So we've got inclusion, mm-hmm. and
So we have
connection.
inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, who am I to say what's right and wrong, apart from that we want to alleviate suffering? I think that's the only thing we can say. We want less suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think according to those values, or the values that a culture has, that's how we make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so if our decisions are more based on the values that we have and what we want to achieve, then we're likely to create environments that bring us closer to
Mm-hmm.
that.
Awesome. Do you design with conscious intent, and how do you incorporate these principles into your everyday practice?
First of all, I have to say that the type of work that I do has changed over the years,
Okay.
because I came from an architecture background, and I was doing architecture projects in the sense of all of the phases that an architect is involved in, from concept all the way to being on site whilst it's being constructed, doing the detailing, and passing it on to the client. Over time, the type of work that I do and my practice does has kind of shifted to the earlier stages of a project, meaning we don't always go to detailing projects and so on. We frame a project in terms of the kind of impact and goals that it can have.
Mm-hmm.
We create a strategic brief for how a project should be approached. And we create insights for that inform design decisions during the design process. And then we work with other architects to do that. And I think that's a choice. That's a choice of what I believe the role of the architect is. And I believe it should be moving away from technicalities um, that other professions do really well anyway.
Hmm.
And perhaps going back to what I think the essence of architecture is, which is the curation of experiences. And so you asked like whether I design with conscious intent. I think the work that we do is focuses on the idea of intent. How do you understand whether your intent is the right one for the community that you're designing for the people experiencing the space? And there is a way to look at that and to understand that your role as an architect, as a designer, might not be to create a form or image that you want to leave behind. Maybe your role as an architect is simply to enable and represent the needs of people in a space and use your skills to manifest a collective intent.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you can talk about intent in that way. And then there's also the idea of informing your awareness and your design decisions with scientific insight. And I think all of those things pertain to this question of, do you design with conscious intent? You have to understand what intent is and
Hmm.
I guess work around that to build your way of thinking.
What has been the biggest difference your work has made to humanity and their health and well-being thus far? Is there a project? Is there a...
It's yeah. I think that's a difficult question because I don't want to be presumptuous about, what the effect of my work has been. I think maybe I'd rather say what I hope I can
Okay.
achieve or what I
Yes.
hope I contribute to.
Hmm.
Um, I think there are projects in which we did the full cycle of a conscious design process in which we got feedback as to how
Hmm.
an environment performed.
Hmm.
So, for example, Urban Thingscape is a project in Philadelphia.
Hmm.
And the goal of that project was to create opportunities for play and learning for people in their everyday lives as they go from one place to another on the street or waiting for a bus stop or so on. And I worked with Kathy Hirsch-Pasek and Roberta Golingoff, who were pioneers in the science of playful learning. So they're psychologists.
Hmm.
And the project worked to translate the science of playful learning into a spatial experience. And what emerged out of that was an environment that encouraged playful learning, encouraged interaction between children and caregivers, between children and other children. And the impact that was assessed for that also looked at the kind of measures of what was the quality of those interactions, did we increase interactions, all for the goal of healthier child development.
Hmm.
And so there are projects like that in which you get feedback, actual, data that says, yes, this worked. You
Hmm.
made an impact.
Hmm.
So those are one kind of project. And the other kinds of projects, I think, are much harder to understand what their impact is. So
Hmm.
what I mentioned in Urban Thingscape is a project at Hume, the science-informed design practice that I lead.
Hmm.
But I also lead at the Center for Conscious Design, which is an organization. It's an international collective of people
Hmm.
working around conscious design principles, and it serves the conscious cities movement as well. And the work for the CCD, the Center for Conscious Design, I think is much harder to understand what the impact is because in a lot of ways it's ephemeral. It's bringing people together to create dialogue. It's about talking about how we can think and design differently, how we can shape our relationship with place differently. And these are very, high level concepts that sometimes trickle down to concrete ideas like a methodology for design.
Hmm.
But a lot of the time, they are out there in the world, in people's discussions, kind of changing the way we think in a way that's not necessarily measurable.
Hmm.
Uh, and so a lot of my work, I think, I don't know what the impact is, but I hope that the impact is in creating a healthier relationship with place through dialogue, through changing the way we design, through creating a community of practice that designs differently, improves that things can be done differently.
Awesome. I love it. What's next for Itai and the work you do?
I wouldn't say that I can't foresee the future completely, definitely not the far future. So I can only say kind of I'm going to keep on following the things that make me curious. Seems to me a way of doing things that's worked so far, or at least kept me interested in what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And I think the things that make me curious are um, there are foundational things like understanding the person-space relationship, bringing to life that dialogue between people and place, understanding what it takes to bring that dialogue to life. How do we understand the language in which we speak through space and space speaks to us?
Hmm.
These are all things that are kind of missing for us, surprisingly. And there are theories here and there that are useful for it, but I think we have a long way to go until we have uh, strong tools that really change the way we design, and a long way to go in changing the design professions to let's say raise the probability or give us a better chance of ensuring that healthier environments emerge.
Hmm.
So I think what's next is a lot of a
Research.
continuation of
Yeah.
what was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Research, continual
Yeah.
conversations and dialogue and all that. What can architects, designers, and urban planners do to make impactful changes in the physical environments of where we work, live, and are educated?
In my opinion, the very first thing for a designer to have an impact is understanding the intent of what they're doing.
Mm.
And uh, I think approaching design with let's call it a scientific humility. I think there is architecture comes from a very privileged background, meaning it's a profession that people hire architects and designers for very different reasons that they hire other professionals. When you hire an engineer or someone with a technical knowledge, which is usually what we do, then their knowledge is based on evidence. You don't, an engineer isn't going to tell you, I think the building should be this way or that way because, that's prettier. I mean, obviously they have aesthetic considerations, but they have to make it stand. They have to make it work. There is a science to it. Whereas the architecture profession, I think, because of where it originates socially as a profession that came from upper classes originally, I think has been a bit lazy in catching up with what professions should be, and that it should be based on merit and evidence rather than taste.
Hmm.
And so I think when you ask what can designers and architects do to have impact, I think it's be is maybe in helping to steer collectively our profession into one that is evidence-based, that has the scientific humility of saying, I have intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Good architects have good intuition about how people experience space, but also our intuition should be corrected sometimes, and we should seek out to inform our intuition for the future. And so I think there isn't one thing that I would say architects and designers should do to create an impact. It's really about looking at ourselves as a community, as a profession, and seeking to ensure that we are still useful as a profession in this world. And I think part of that usefulness is moving away from this privileged background that it's okay to base everything on taste and experience, and starting to say the reason you should come to an architect is because XYZ. And in my opinion, that XYZ is that we should have the tools and the skills to represent, to understand your needs and represent your intent as faithfully as possible with the experience that we have. And for the architect or the ego of the architect and the designer to not be part of the end product. In a way, maybe we need to be mediums for people's intent to be manifested rather than be the place in which an aesthetic or design decisions originate from.
Cool. I like it. Um, my 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 final question is
Are you confused? I'm not sure about your response.
no, I'm not confused. I see elements of it. I feel maybe here in Australia we've lost a bit of credibility. That yeah, that's my opinion at this point in time. We've lost a bit of credibility. So we've gone from like a privileged profession to a we've been pushed into a corner of doing things for uh, not nothing, but the outcome wasn't the intent. If that it just sort
Mm-hmm.
of gets diluted, and then that becomes out of the designer's control, or the
Yeah.
architect's control, which I think is really sad. And I think we need to go back to really, like you say, the intent and being conscious about that intent and being conscious about the environment and how we can play that part, being conscious about the social part and the purpose. Like buildings need to be fit for purpose. And are they being built fit for purpose at the moment? Um,
Yeah. I think I really agree. And I think what
uh,
you first said, what I'm saying too, which is I think the architecture profession has sought out to make itself relevant
mm,
through a lot of tasks and roles
mm,
that are not necessarily related to curating experience or understanding the built environment in that way. And
exactly.
in a lot of ways, when architecture students graduate and they come from an environment in which they have a lot of freedom to be creative, to problem solve in creative ways, to concentrate on the non-administration and non-gray tasks of an
Yes,
architecture practice, and then they go into practice and they end up being a lot of the time really project managers.
exactly. Instead of what they were trained to do. Mm,
Exactly, and I think that is just the evidence that we haven't that the architecture profession has become lazy
Mm.
about what we're actually supposed to be doing. Because if we can prove, and this is the point of science-informed design and conscious
Mm-hmm.
design,
Mm-hmm.
if we can prove the value of
Mm-hmm.
our contribution to
Mm-hmm.
creating environments,
Mm-hmm.
then we regain the purpose of architectural practice, and we move away from project management and a lot of things that, there are there's training and professions for project management. There are people who know how to do it
Mm-hmm.
better than us.
Mm-hmm.
We just get thrown into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the reason why architecture practice is so kind of dispersed and architects take on so many different tasks that aren't related to designing a space
Mm-hmm.
is because of that lack of direction that the profession has had for so long.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to change.
And get
And I
back.
think the vehicle for, yeah, and I think the vehicle for that change is in creating an evidence base and a way to measure and to show and to bring to light the value of good design decisions. And good design decisions means backing it up with more insights, more information, not just relying on our intuition and our taste.
Love it. Final question, how does technology play a role in all this going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do think, I mean, when AI first started kind of coming out, we everyone was like, yeah, but it's not gonna replace creative work. It's replacing creative work, and it's doing a pretty good job in a lot of ways. And I think what's surprising about AI in the last few years is that often it is more creative than us, and it can take into account more information than us. And I think it would, and I think we are heading into a future in which AI and other technology are going to take over a lot of what we do. What's left is communicating with that technology,
Mm.
is asking that technology to do things, giving it goals, giving it the direction in which it can use all of the crazy skills that it has and will have. And so I think what that leaves architects to is really, it's kind of like becoming more and more condensed version of what architecture is, which is intent. And when you have technology that does a lot of the work and a lot of the tasks that architects have, but all you have left is speaking and communicating with that technology to get to somewhere, then your work becomes solely how to articulate intent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't, I'm kind of agnostic as to whether this is a good thing or not. I think a lot of the time technology takes us to places whether we like it or not, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the nature of our societies. So I think that what's important for us to be discussing is how we become more aware of the impact of this technology,
Mm-hmm.
and how we become more aware of leveraging it for good. And I think that's what I'm referring to when I'm saying that we need to become really good at articulating intent, because in the end, the words that we choose and the way that we communicate with technology they are going to shape people's
Mm-hmm.
lives
Mm-hmm.
and our environment. And therefore articulation is key.
Mm. a
to
bit,
not messing things up.
it's scary, but it's
Yeah,
reality. Yeah.
it's scary, but it's happening.
And there's
And I
nothing we can
think
do about
that
it.
no, and also I think maybe there is a way to. I'm not necessarily a tech optimist because I think technology does a lot of damage to us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's good to try and be optimistic about something that is probably inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
But cautiously optimistic, meaning we have to be aware of the mistakes that we could be making
Mm-hmm.
and the damage that technology could create,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot, but also humans create a lot of damage without the help of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily just the technology's fault. I think it's always our responsibility in
To design
understanding decisions that we make,
and
whether it's
design.
through AI or normal.
And it's having that conscious intent. These could be the outcomes of what I'm doing.
Exactly. Yep.
That conscious intent. I love it. Thank you, Itai. You've been fabulous.
Hey, thank you for having me. And it's nice to speak to you. And thanks for the questions, the good questions. And I hope that what we spoke about resonates with designers, with anyone who is dealing with the built environment, and I guess spark some curiosity or some imagination or some motivation to change our relationship with place and make it healthier. And so I would encourage anyone who is interested also to check out the Center for Conscious Design and Hume. The Center for Conscious Design is a collective, and we want to bring people in. We want a larger dialogue, and so I think everyone has the agency to create change themselves as well. And I hope that this discussion might help in encouraging that.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is what it's all about, is making people aware. So thank you. I hope you've enjoyed the latest episode of The Felt Experience. I'm Melissa Henschke, your host. Thank you for tuning in. Please leave any queries, questions you may have on the various platforms you've tuned in through. We look forward to seeing you next time.